Our spotlight educator for this month, or really up until Shavuot, Rabbi Jeremy Bruce, who is the director of the Jonathan Sachs Foundation for North America. Is that correct? Did I get that?
Correct.
That title correct. We're very excited. Actually, while director for North America lives right locally in Beechwood, and we're excited to have you with us, teaching with us for 4 weeks this week. And then we're not meeting next week, but in 2 weeks at 8 p.m. May 4th, we actually have 2 sessions, a 7 p.m. session and then 8 p.m. with Rabbi Bruce, and then May 11th and May 18th. And I know Rabbi Bruce will also be teaching as part of our Tikkun Leil Shavuot, which also happens to be a Thursday evening, May 25th. But we're very excited to have you with us. We're going to see maybe if you want to take a minute to see if the video will work, or we can try to fix it for 2 weeks from now, but I'm not sure why it's working. Haven't seen that issue.
So good evening. Thank you, Rabbi Foster, for introducing me and for inviting me. It's very exciting to be teaching here with this very fancy technology. So I hope we can make things work. We're going to have to improvise this week, and we're not going to show the videos, and hopefully we can get that sorted for next week. But you can find these videos online, so we're happy to share that with you. Anyway, without further ado, as you heard, my name is Jeremy Bruce. I'm the Executive Director of the Rabbi Sachs Legacy in North America. I've had that position for just under a year. Prior to that, I was the high school principal of Fuchs Mizrahi. And as you can hear, I didn't originally grow up in Cleveland. I come all the way from over the pond and have been in the States nearly 9 years now. First in Connecticut and then in Ohio. So, Rabbi Sachs, who is Rabbi Sachs? Who was Rabbi Sachs? Someone who impacted Jewish people and non-Jewish people across the world. An astonishing figure of our generation, perhaps the most influential Jewish figure in our generation, possibly in the last few generations. His impact extended far beyond the Jewish community. And I wanted to kick off really with that video that I was trying to show you, but unfortunately it doesn't work. And the first person you hear who is talking in that video is King Charles, was Prince and is now King Charles. And that is because King Charles had a very close relationship with Rabbi Sachs that went back decades into the early 90s, which is really quite astonishing. It wasn't just a formal chief rabbi and royalty relationship. It was a close personal friendship. And Rabbi Sachs actually had close personal friendships with many figures, intellectual figures, political figures, leaders across the world. So the question tonight is, why is that? And together we're going to study a little bit about him and his role. But first I'd like to just introduce myself. So I've told you a little bit about myself, but my relationship with Rabbi Sachs. You can see a lovely little picture there of me about 10, 12 years ago when I was getting my master's degree. And as you can see, Rabbi Sachs was there to present me with my certificate. It was a wonderful occasion. I've known Rabbi Sachs since I was a teenager, and I've had the privilege of speaking to him many times, learning from him many times, being inspired by him many times. Rabbi Sachs, as well as being this astonishing intellectual giant, was also very humble and willing to give of his time to those that wished to meet with him. Despite being the friend and advisor to royalty and to political leaders, intellectual leaders, he always made time for you. I remember as a young rabbi back in the UK, my first job, I can't remember what happened, but there was some incident that I really needed some advice. So I called up his office And then within 15 minutes, I had his voice on the phone, and he spoke to me for half an hour, 45 minutes about the issue. And I can't remember exactly what the issue was, but I know that I was so impressed that the then chief rabbi was so responsive and so willing to give his time to a young rabbi such as myself. But Rabbi Sachs wasn't just a wonderful friend and advisor and support to rabbis. I want to show you the next picture. So this here on the right is my son. He is now 19. So this was a few years ago, and this was in his kindergarten. And Rabbi Sachs came to this kindergarten, and my son at the time, he's a little more rested now, but my son at the time was quite outgoing. And he said, his name's Gavin, as you can see from his kippah, and he said, to Rabbi Sachs, who walked in, "Hey, you know my..." Rabbi Sachs, as you can see there, bent down and said to one of the teachers, "Here, let's take a photo and then let's give that to your father." Just that example. The Rabbi Sachs had that personal touch. It wasn't just the brilliant ideas. It wasn't just his relationship with royalty and intellectual leaders and political leaders. He also had the ability in the moment to relate to a young child. And for me, that really encapsulates who he was, who we lost. So someone to be so brilliant and so impactful, but at the same time to be able to relate to everyone on a one-to-one basis is really astonishing. So those are my personal stories of Rabbi Sachs. I'm going to stop sharing for the moment so I can see everyone. Okay. So it's good to see you all. Some of you put your cameras on. Feel free to put your cameras on, not whatever you feel most comfortable. So who was Rabbi Sachs? Rabbi Sachs was the chief rabbi of the UK, but also it's called the Commonwealth. So countries around the world that used to be part of the British Empire. So the Rabbi Sachs was the chief rabbi of Australia and New Zealand and South Africa, etc., for a good while. Rabbi Sachs grew up in London. He came from a traditional household. Actually, his parents were involved in a synagogue, but they weren't necessarily knowledgeable and they weren't necessarily religious in a traditional sense, of an Orthodox sense. In fact, Rabbi Sachs did not go to a Jewish school, to a Jewish elementary school or a Jewish high school. You may be surprised to know that Rabbi Sachs went to a high school called, wonderful for a future chief rabbi, Christ College. Christ College. So the future chief rabbi went to a school called Christ College, a very good school in northwest London. And then because he was brilliant, got into Cambridge. And he thought he would be a lawyer, an economist, an academic. He studied philosophy and was a brilliant young man. Then 1967 happened. And in 1967, as some of you may remember, there was a great outpouring of prayer, of hope, of fear, of connection because of the concern about what might happen in the Six-Day War. Of course, we now know there was a tremendous victory, a great miracle. In 6 days, Israel defeated its enemies. But before that victory, you may recall, there was a real sense that this could be the end of Israel, and a real fear. And what happened was that world Jewry came out in their masses. And he was in Cambridge at the time, and he got that sense of connection that he had never had before. And then after the Six-Day War was over and Israel won, there was also a tremendous increase in connection to the Jewish people. People became more connected to their religious life. Rabbi Sachs, he was 19 years old, decided to take a journey to North America. So he came over in 1968, in the summer of 68, and he wanted to visit and speak to the top rabbis in North America. Now, he was 19 years old. No one knew who he was. And he said, I most want to talk to the Lubavitcher Rebbe and Rabbi Soloveitchik. So these were even in the late 1960s, the absolute leaders of orthodoxy in North America. And they were very busy and very difficult to get hold of. But somehow, and there's a long story he tells about this, Rabbi Sachs was able to have a meeting with both Rabbi Soloveitchik and, most impactfully, the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He tells the story of meeting the Lubavitcher Rebbe and asking him all sorts of questions. But at some point in their discussion, the Lubavitcher Rebbe started asking questions of Rabbi Sachs. How many Jews were in Cambridge? Who came to synagogue? Who was involved? Who was connected? And then he asked him the following question. Jonathan, what are you going to do about the Jewish people in Cambridge? And Rabbi Sachs, who became Rabbi Sachs, was like astonished by this. And me, what should I do? And then the Lubavitcher Rebbe said something which drove Rabbi Sachs for the rest of his life. And he said the following: good leaders create followers. Great leaders create leaders. Be a great leader. Be a great leader. Rabbi Sachs was challenged by the Lubavitcher Rebbe not to create followers, but to empower others to be leaders. And I believe he succeeded in that in a tremendous way. Across the world today, you have hundreds, if not thousands, of people who see themselves in their leadership, in their careers, in how they developed throughout their lives as directly impacted by the inspiration of Rabbi Sachs, who was following in the footsteps of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So, yes, he became a chief rabbi, but beyond being a chief rabbi, yes, he also wrote 40 books. Astonishingly, he almost wrote a book a year. Astonishing output. Despite being all of that, he really saw his role as being a leader of leaders, of inspiring other people to lead, what I would call a multiplier effect. That is a very brief background to Rabbi Sachs. Let's look at our source. Does everyone have the source sheet in front of them? Does everyone have access to that? Wonderful. I wanted to show you. The very famous animated speech that he first did, which is called "Why I Am a Jew." Has anyone seen that? It's a whiteboard animation. Anyone seen that? So if you haven't seen that, not now, but very simple. On YouTube, look this up, because I cannot do justice to the way that Rabbi Sachs expresses it. He has the most wonderful speaking voice. But after the class, can I suggest that you look up "Why I Am a Jew"? But let's read the transcript together, because tonight's class is "Why I Am a Jew." What drove Rabbi Sachs? What drove Rabbi Sachs? So let's read this together. Can everyone hear me okay? Is the volume good? Fantastic. So source number 2. The deepest question any of us can ask is, who am I? To answer it, we have to go deeper than where do I live or what do I do? The most faithful moment in my life came when I asked myself that question and knew the answer had to be, I am a Jew. And this is why. I am a Jew not because I believe that Judaism contains all there is of the human story. I admire other traditions and their contributions to the world. Nor am I a Jew because of anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism. What happens to me does not define who I am. Ours is a people of faith, not fate. Nor is it because I think that Jews are better than others, more intelligent, creative, generous, or successful. It's not Jews who are different, but Judaism. It's not so much what we are, but what we are called on to be. I am a Jew because, being a child of my people, I have heard the call to add my chapter to its unfinished story. I am a stage on its journey, a connecting link between the generations. The dreams and hopes of my ancestors live on in me, and I am the guardian of their trust, now and for the future. I am a Jew because our ancestors were the first to see that the world is driven by a moral purpose. That reality is not a ceaseless war of the elements to be worshipped as gods, nor history a battle in which might is right and power is to be appeased. The Judaic traditions shaped the moral civilization of the West, teaching for the first time that human life is sacred, that the individual may never be sacrificed for the mass, and that the rich, the poor, the great and small are all equal before God. I am a Jew because I am the moral heir of those who stood at the foot of Mount Sinai and pledged themselves to live by these truths for all time. I am the descendant of countless generations of ancestors who, those sorely tested and bitterly tried, remained faithful to the covenant when they might so easily have defected. I am a Jew because of Shabbat, the world's greatest religious institution, a time in which there is no manipulation of nature or of our fellow human beings, in which we come together in freedom and equality to create every week an anticipation of the Messianic age. I am a Jew because our nation, though at times it suffered the deepest poverty, never gave up on its commitment to helping the poor or rescuing Jews from other lands or fighting for justice for the oppressed, and did so without self-congratulation because it was a mitzvah and because a Jew could do no less. I am a Jew because I cherish the Torah, knowing that God is to be found not just in natural forces, but in moral meanings, in words, texts, teachings, and commands. And because Jews, though they lacked all else, never ceased to value education as a sacred task, endowing the individual with dignity and depth. I am a Jew because of our people's passionate faith in freedom, holding that each of us is a moral agent and that in this lies our unique dignity as human beings. And because Judaism never left its ideals at the level of lofty aspirations, but instead translated them into deeds which we call mitzvot, and a way which we call halakha, and thus brought heaven down to earth. I am proud simply to be a Jew. I am proud to be part of a people who, though scarred and traumatized, never lost their humor or their faith, their ability to laugh at present troubles and still believe in ultimate redemption, who saw human history as a journey and never stopped traveling and searching. I am proud to be part of an age in which my people, ravaged by the worst crime ever to be committed against the people, responded by reviving a land, recovering their sovereignty, rescuing threatened Jews throughout the world, rebuilding Jerusalem, and proving themselves to be as courageous in the pursuit of peace as in defending themselves in war. I am proud that our ancestors refused to be satisfied with premature consolations, and in answer to the question, has the Messiah come, always answered, not yet. I am proud to belong to the people Israel, whose name means God and with man and prevails. For though we have loved humanity, we have never stopped wrestling with it, challenging the idols of every age. And though we have loved God with an everlasting love, we have never stopped wrestling with him, nor he with us. I admire other civilizations and traditions and believe each has brought something special into the world. Aval zeh shalane, but this is ours. This is my people, my heritage, my faith. In our uniqueness lies our universality. Through being what we alone are, we give to humanity what only we can give. This, then, is our story, our gift to the next generation. I received it from my parents and they from theirs across great expanses of space and time. There is nothing quite like it. It changed and it still challenges the moral imagination of mankind. I want to say to Jews around the world, take it, cherish it, learn to understand and to love it, carry it and it will carry you. And may you in turn pass it on to future generations, for you are a member of an eternal people, a letter in their scroll. Let their eternity live on in you. So if I stop there, I mean, for me, I have heard this countless times. For me, it's just astonishing how powerful every sentence of that was. And even more astonishing is that Rabbi Sachs would write books of prose like that. I say prose, it's almost poetry. It's beautiful, it's impactful, it's powerful. And that is what he did. And that is what we have lost. So where did this amazing sort of charge to the Jewish people come from? Well, it came from two places. When Rabbi Sachs took on the chief rabbinate, he was extremely concerned with, in the UK, with assimilation and intermarriage. He was very concerned about the decline in the numbers of the Jewish people. And he launched a campaign which he entitled, "Will We Have Jewish Grandchildren?" Will we have Jewish grandchildren? And that was his campaign for at least a decade, trying to persuade Anglo Jewry, British Jewry, that Judaism was something worth keeping, was something worth protecting and investing in. And he succeeded. Obviously, he did not end assimilation. He did not end intermarriage. But the British Jewish community today is significantly stronger. And I can just give you an example of how. And this will be astonishing to those of you, to the American audience. But in the UK, Jewish schools are almost totally funded by the state. So the vast majority of Jewish schools are state funded, which is amazing in terms of the affordability. It certainly brings its own challenges with that, with government oversight and strings attached. But over his chief rabbinate, it got to the point whereby in London, approximately 80% of the community, and 80% of the community's elementary school children were in Jewish day schools. 80%. So an astonishing number, an astonishing number. So the community changed because of him. But this passage, which I just shared with you, actually comes from this book here, A Letter in the Scroll. Can you see this? So at the end of the sheet, by the way, I've actually put these references there so you can have a look at that yourself. Actually, the videos, the URLs for the videos are on the sheet as well. So this book here came out I think it came out in the 90s. And I can tell you a story, actually came out in 2000 here in America. It's actually called, in England, this same book is called Radical Now, Radical Then. But the American publishers said you can't use the word radical in America. It has different connotations. So A Letter in the Scroll. So if you read the introduction of this book, Rabbi Sachs tells the story of some students coming to him, some college students coming to him, asking him about a project that they'd like to do. And he suggested, why don't you write to Jewish thinkers and intellectuals across the world, asking them simply this question, why be Jewish? And one of those responses was from the late and very great Jewish Oxford philosopher, Sir Isaiah Berlin. I don't know if any of you have heard of him. He was the great philosopher of liberalism, a brilliant, brilliant man, a Jew originally from Riga, who came to the UK, I think before the war, and became an Oxford professor and a very important man. He wrote a letter, which essentially, a very short letter, which essentially said, I am a Jew because I can be nothing else. I am a Jew in the same way that I have 2 arms and 2 legs and 2 eyes. And that's it. It's just who I am. Now, Rabbi Sachs really did not like that answer. He thought that was a terrible answer. By the way, he had a lot of respect for Sir Isaiah Berlin and actually officiated at his funeral a few years after he wrote that. Now, I'm telling you the story because actually the student that he spoke to was me. I was the Director of Education for the Union of Jewish Students, And that year we went to Rabbi Sachs and we asked him what we should do, because that year we knew that the semester would not be over during Pesach, during Passover, a little bit like this year, I think. We wanted to provide a Haggadah and some sort of guide for students who would be in college around the country. And this was a conversation we had from him. I can tell you that when we received the letter from Isaiah Berlin, we were ecstatic. We couldn't believe this great philosopher had written back to us. But Rabbi Sachs did not like that at all. And as you do, he didn't like it. He didn't say, I didn't like it. He said, I'm going to write a book. And here's the book that he wrote. And this is the book he wrote in response to that. So as you can see, Rabbi Sachs felt that Judaism, so I can see a question. Was Isaiah Berlin at Woolston? Probably yes. He was probably at Woolston College in Oxford. I'm not sure, but you can look it up. I'm sure it's on Wikipedia. But yes. So, Rabbi Sachs believed that Jews had a vitally important role to play in the world. And to being a Jew wasn't simply the fact that we are born Jewish or we convert into Judaism, that there is a specific role that Jews have to play in the world. And this animated everything he did throughout his life. Let's look at source 3. Uniquely, Jews are born into a faith. It chooses us before we choose it. Physically, we come naked into the world, but spiritually, we come with a gift, the story of our past and of our parents and theirs through almost 40 centuries from the day Abraham and Sarah first heard the call of God and began their journey to a land, a promise, a destiny, and a vocation. That story is ours. It is a strange and moving story. It tells us of how a family, then a collection of tribes and a nation were summoned to be God's ambassadors on earth. They were charged with building a society unlike any other, based not on wealth and power, but on justice and compassion. The dignity of the individual and the sanctity of human life, a society that would honor the world, God's work, and the human person as God's image. So I'll just pause there. Rabbi Sachs is telling us that our story, the inception of our people, from the very beginning of our peoplehood, was about morality, was about character, was about human dignity. In the face of the great empires of Mesopotamia and Egypt, we had this small, tiny family tribe and their nation that stood for something distinct and different. And that, for Rabbi Sachs, still animates us to this day. Let's carry on. That was a demanding task, yet Judaism remains a realistic religion. It assumes from the outset that transforming the world would take many generations. Hence the importance of handing on our ideals to the next generation. It takes many gifts, many different kinds of talent, hence the importance of Jews as a people. None of us has all the gifts, but each of us has some. We all count. We each have a unique contribution to make. We come before God as a people, each giving something and each lifted by the contributions of others. And yes, at times we fail or fall short, hence the importance of teshuvah, repentance, apology, forgiveness, rededication. Judaism is bigger than any of us and yet is made up by all of us. And though Jews were and are a tiny people, today a mere 1/5 of the population of the world, we have made a contribution to civilization out of all proportion to our numbers. To be a Jew is to continue the journey our ancestors began, to build a world that honors the image of God in every human being, and to be part of a people summoned by God to be his ambassadors down here on earth. You can hear the passion, you can hear the vision. What he's trying to tell us is that it is a distinct privilege to be a Jew. But you may have noticed already, and we'll talk more about this in future classes, he's not denigrating anyone else. He's not saying we are superior. He's not saying that we are intrinsically special, which was the controversial position that he had. He believed we had a unique mission and task, and we were called on to fulfill that mission. In other writings, he was quite happy to admit that other people, other cultures had their missions. But what he wanted to say to the Jewish people was, be proud of your heritage, because it's a unique and astonishing one. And I don't know if any of you heard him. He came to Cleveland, I think, 7 or 8 years ago. I don't know if any of you had the opportunity to go and hear him. But when you hear him in person, I mean, obviously you just read him, but he captures you. He captures you in a way that few others do. It's an enraptured audience, because but it's not just because he spoke so beautifully and brilliantly and so cleverly. It was because underpinning that with the sense of mission is that we are here for a purpose, that he was here for a purpose, and he wanted to convey that to people. So let's go a stage further. Let me pause before we go a stage further. Any thoughts or questions? Please unmute yourself or put it in the chat. Happy to. Any thoughts or questions at this point?
I just wanted to offer that when he was here, I was at a breakfast with him, which was a real privilege because, we tend to read his comments on the various parshiot every week, and in that series of 5 volumes. And I think one of the amazing things about Rabbi Sachs, and you pretty much said this already, but I'll just sort of confirm it for ourselves here, is that he's able to put so many of these concepts into language that's clear and concise and communicates so effectively. I sometimes wish I could encapsulate some of the ideas that he shares anywhere, even half as well, and that would be quite an accomplishment. And he does it in a way that's, as you said, so approachable, really. And I thought that was one of the things about that breakfast, because when I was invited to breakfast, I thought, wow, this is the great Rabbi Sachs. Probably we won't even have a chance to say a word to each other, but it'll be wonderful to be in the room. But he really was approachable for everyone in the room, and he made you feel comfortable, and yet conveyed all of this really deep information in an amazingly clear and concise way. It was a wonderful privilege and pleasure to be in that room with him, even though it was only that one time.
Right, 100%. Thank you for sharing that. And yet, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. The ability to, because often I think, people who are brilliant often find it very hard to relate to mere mortals. But he didn't. He didn't. As I said, that's why I wanted to show you that picture of my son, and that he crouched down. And to me, I wasn't even there, but I was deeply touched by the fact that he did that to a young child. It was astonishing. So I see, and thank you so much for sharing that. I see, sorry, forgive me if I see a hand raised. Is it Tybel? I can't see exactly.
It's Tybel, the Yiddish.
Yes, hi, please. Yes.
If it's okay to ask you. So, and I'm actually in Maryland. I'm not in Cleveland. And I don't know that he had come here, but in the pandemic, about once a month, I've been studying with someone named Daniel Reinhold, who is English and at yeshiva. And I just discovered that Daniel and someone else that I've studied with on occasion, Rabbi Rafi Zerim, are both Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, if I can use the term acolytes or students or mentees or whatever. And like, there's this cohort. And I was just wondering if you knew either of them, if you were somehow part of that cohort, etc.
So I know both of them extremely well, good friends with both of them. I've known them for years. I'm not part of that cohort. Our organization does something slightly different. Rafi is part of at the London School of Jewish Studies, which is a small education college in London. He's the dean of that, and he's the Lord Jonathan Sachs, Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs chair. Daniel is the dean of the Revel School in Yeshiva University. So I know them both well. But our organization, the Rabbi Sachs Legacy, grew out of Rabbi Sachs's office, and our trustees are his family and people who worked with him closely throughout his life. But I know them well, and if you want a further introduction, I'm happy to make that connection with you.
Oh, and then I just say my actual first connection was, I don't know, 20 some years ago, because Gila Sachs came to a conference of Jewish educators as whatever. So when you say his family, by chance, is Gila part of the trustees?
Yeah, she's one of our trustees. Her husband Elliot is a chair of our board. So yes, and I'm speaking to Gila on Monday. So I'll let her know that,
Well,
that you mentioned
she
him.
wouldn't. I don't think she would. She wouldn't remember my name, though. We had this big session, but the organization she came to was Cage. She represented Limud at Cage.
Yes. Fantastic. Thank you for sharing. Any other questions before we move on? Wonderful. Okay, so I want to teach you a little bit of Torah from where Rabbi Sachs is inspired. You all know this piece here, number 4, Bereshit, Genesis 12:1. Vayomer Hashem el Avram, lech lecha me'artzecha mimolatcha beit avicha el haaretz asher arecha. And the Lord said to Abram, leave your country, your people, your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse, and all the families on the earth will be blessed through you. So I'm going to ask a question. This is not a rhetorical question. I'd love some responses. Why did God choose Abraham? And I'm going to, before you answer, according to the Torah text. Why did God choose Noah? According to the Torah text.
Noah was the righteous in his generation.
Indeed, he was the righteous of his generation. What do we know about Abraham before God tells him to leave his home and his father's house?
He was an
Not
iconoclast.
much.
Say again?
He was an iconoclast. He did not go
Okay.
with the, he
Great.
didn't flow with the, he didn't flow
Fantastic.
with the,
Fantastic answer. And now I'm going to bring it back to you. Is that in the Torah text?
it's in the Midrash.
But that's not the Torah text.
No, it isn't.
Right. If
So
you
they're
are
making
going
an excuse. Midrash is making, is also asking the same question.
exactly. And the
it's
reason
made up
why there is exactly the stories you know about Abraham come from the Midrashim, and the Midrashim have to provide a tremendous amount of backstory because we don't know why God chose Abraham. All we know is he's Terach's son. That's it. They know nothing more than that. Nothing more. We know some biographical information. Well, we knew that for about all the previous generations. And so the Midrashim have to come along and fill in the gaps. And so I said, Sheila, is that right? Sheila just mentioned about the iconoclast, that famous Midrash where Abraham in the idol store. I love that Midrash. I mean, it's literally an iconoclast. The word iconoclast means smasher of idols, right, of icons, literally iconoclast. So that's one of those Midrashim, but it's not in the text. Okay, Ellen, I can see you've got your hand up.
I was going to say, and what I'd said we knew about him was not much, but I think we know something very important, which is his name and the meaning of his name.
Okay. What does the original name mean?
Abram, which I think still has the root father, Father of people, right?
Or big people, or lots of people, or a large people. It's not clear what it means, but let's hold off that. Alan, I can see you've got your hand up. Is that Alan?
Larry?
Maybe you
Larry?
didn't mean to put your hand, Alan.
Larry? You talking
I
about?
want to say there's one other thing, and that is that his wife can have no children.
Okay, true. Right.
That,
Okay.
that his wife is akara, can
That's
have
right.
no children. And I think that's crucial. That's crucial.
Okay, good. Yeah,
because
good.
the promise is he will be the father of a great nation. And one thing we know from the text itself in chapter 11 is that he can't be the father of one child.
But
because his wife is barren.
That's true. That is true. But is that a reason why he was told to leave his father's house? We know that afterwards.
No.
So we don't know what. We don't know what. Yeah?
Well, maybe that's part of the answer. Knowing that his wife is barren and the promise, leaving in the ancient world, leaving one's house and one's clan and so forth was basically committing suicide.
Right.
Because there was no one to protect you.
Right.
And God asked him to do that and promised as a reward that he'd be the father of a great nation. Okay. But we know he can't be the father of one son.
All true. I'm still asking the question and as to what was special about him, and the fact is we don't know from the text what was special about him. I can see that is that Lewis? Is that sorry? Go on.
It's Larry. Can you hear me?
Sorry, Larry. Yeah, go
on. He invited the stranger. He sought out people. He was a teacher. He wanted to inspire people with his beliefs. They didn't have to adapt his beliefs, but he wanted them to know what he had found. So there's something about that's special, and he was kind to people. He treated the stranger like they were himself.
Right.
Washed their feet. Told
100%. 100%. I would say but Larry, the only thing I'll say is that happens in the text after he comes to the land of Canaan. You're right, but it doesn't answer the question as to why he was called in the first place. What was special before he was called? You're correct. Let's go into the midrash, because I think Sheila or someone talked about the iconoclast. There's another midrash which is something that inspired Rabbi Sachs deeply. This midrash, God said to Abraham, "Go forth from your land." Rabbi Yitzchak opened, "Listen, daughter, look and incline your ear and forget your people and your father's house." Rabbi Yitzchak said, "This may be compared to a man who was traveling from place to place when he saw a castle aglow." Alternatively, might mean burning or on fire. He said, Abraham, "Is it possible," or the man, "is it possible that the castle lacks a person to look after it?" The owner of the building looked at him and said, "I am the master of the castle." What happened with Abraham our father was similar. He said, "Is it possible that this universe lacks a person to look after it?" And the Holy One, blessed be he, looked at him and said, "I am the master of the universe. And let the king be aroused by your beauty, since he is your master, and let the king be aroused for your beauty in the universe, and bow to him." Hence God said to Abraham, "Go forth." So, very important midrash. according to this midrash, why was Abraham chosen?
Because he wanted something new. He was, in a way, the way I look at it from our conversation, is he was being a pioneer, much like they did in the United States. Well, they went from the East Coast, they moved west. We have evidence that he had some business skills with his dealings with the kings. So he was able to make something of himself, and he picked up some morals somewhere along the line, which he was able to transmit. And our connection is, some of the people said, is that he had values like Hachnasat Orchim, welcoming guests, and I mean, his relationships, what he did with Haggai and all. No, he can't be perfect.
Okay, thank you so much. That's one way of looking at it. It's very helpful. Is that
I
Lois?
think that the essence of it seems to be that he was someone who actually recognized that there had to be someone in charge. That's what it pretty much clearly says. If anybody in charge of this castle that's all aglow or maybe on fire? Somebody must be in charge. Somebody must be in charge of this universe that's also aglow.
Okay, right, fantastic. Lois, let's hold that thought. Brilliant.
I was going to say the same thing, that he recognized that there must be a higher power. There must be something controlling the world, and didn't know what it was, but he was the only one maybe that questioned it in his generation.
I'm going to bring what you said together. It's not the midrash. Midrash is, it's not cute children's stories. It's very sophisticated linguistic analysis, very sophisticated, and therefore every word is really important. The Hebrew word for the castle is biria, and the idea is it's doleket. It's doleket. Now, doleket tends to mean on fire. It could also mean lit up, as in like searchlights on the walls. But it makes more sense to a certain extent to say that it's on fire. So then what is the analogy? What did Abraham notice? So David, is it David? Is that right, David? So David, you're
Yes.
right. He noticed that there was someone in charge. But what was he seeing that he noticed? It doesn't say, for example, he saw the beautiful mountains, he saw the oceans, and he realized there must be a God. What did he see?
He wandered though, but he was just going from a civilized city.
No, that's why he went for the civilized city. What did he see? What did he see?
Civilized city?
He went from civilization. He left civilization.
Right. He left civilization, and he
found. Why? Why? What is the burning? What does that mean?
Maybe it means that what he was leaving was, in a sense, on fire, and you could look at what he's leaving as, oh, it's on fire because nothing means anything. Or if you're Avram, you look at it and say, somebody must be in charge of this. I don't understand. Is it on fire and nobody's paying attention to the fire?
Exactly. Abraham is saying, and I'm going to get back to Rabbi Sachs, Abraham is saying the world is on fire. What's going on? At that point, God appears and said, I'm in charge. But it doesn't answer the question. So no, put out the fire. What do you mean? I mean, like, you're in the building or you're next to the building. So get the fire department, put out the... So Rabbi Sachs made a brilliant point, is that for whatever theological reasons, God needs Abraham to help put out the fire. And the first thing that Abraham does is he notices. He pays attention. Everyone else walks by. Everyone else said, none of my business. Someone else's problem. It doesn't belong to me. Abraham says, Abraham did, and why was he chosen? Is because he noticed and he cared.
You know, we say that today about people, that people notice the problems. You know, we notice the climate problem, we notice economic inequities and things like that. It's people who notice things who become
Exactly.
become leaders.
So for Rabbi Sachs, and we're running out of time, alas, for Rabbi Sachs, let's go through why is this important to him? Because let's go to source. Let's go to source 9. What's the purpose of our people? Source 9, a very famous verse from Isaiah. Ani Hashem kraticha b'sedek v'achzek b'yadecha v'etzrecha v'etnecha lebrit am la'or hagoyim. I, the Lord, have called you in righteousness. I will take hold of your hand. I will keep you and will make you to be a covenant for the people and a light for the nations, to open eyes of the blind, to free captives from prison, and to release from the dungeon those who sit in darkness. To be a Jew, for Rabbi Sachs, means to look at the burning world and to figure out a way to put out the flames. That's our role. That's our role. And unfortunately, the fire is very large and it's way too big for one generation to put it out. But therefore, we as a people have a responsibility to A, notice, and B, do something about it. And his whole approach was saying first to the Jewish people, you have a role. But it's not simply just to be Jewish or to have more Jewish children. That's important, but that's not sufficient. It's necessary, but not sufficient. They're necessary to have the children and to teach Torah and to understand our tradition. But the point of it all is to be God's witnesses in fixing this world, in making this world a better place. Now, you may not find this surprising, but for Rabbi Sachs, the fact that he believed this and then used this as a motivation to go and teach Jewish ideas to the world was different. No other Orthodox rabbi, to my mind, in recent times at least, has had this sort of relationship and impact with the non-Jewish world. When I was back in the UK, there was a flagship religion moment on Radio 4, like the top radio show in the UK. It was called A Thought for the Day. And every day a religious leader would come on the radio and speak to millions of people across the country. And Rabbi Sachs, so there's religious leaders, Christians, Hindus, Sikhs, Muslims, everyone. Every time Rabbi Sachs came on the radio, he was astonishing. In 2.5 minutes, he was able to condense an idea for the entire country that was powerful and important. He believed that the Jewish role wasn't simply to teach ourselves to be inward facing. He believed our role was outward facing, was to be proud of our heritage, to know who we were, to understand what we bring to the table, but to bring it to the table, not to raise those walls, not to put ourselves in a self-imposed ghetto, but to go out there proudly as knowledgeable Jews to make a difference to the world. So let's, I just want to end off by, let me just share how I share this again. I want to end off because, there's so much more to tell you, but I want to end off with this little story. Okay, can you see this? The Tim Ferriss show? I had not heard of Tim Ferriss. Have you heard of Tim Ferriss? He has a big radio show. He's like a big he had podcasts anyway. So he interviewed Rabbi Sachs in August of 2020, which was a few months, unfortunately, before he passed away in November 2020. I want to end with this because, again, it comes back to Rabbi Sachs, the brilliant intellectual, the incredible writer, the inspirational speaker. And now let's look at this. Tim Ferriss said, I want to share, how do I do this, yeah? I want to start with perhaps an unusual starting point, and that is asking about the yellow ties. I found under the category of strange habits a note from your wife of 50 years in the Times of the UK Times. He always wears a yellow tie when he's due to give important speeches or on special occasions. Is there any truth to that statement? And could you elaborate if so? Rabbi Sachs says, 100%, Tim. I always used to wear silver ties, this kind of dignified thing that ministers of religion do. And I had a huge collection of silver ties. Then at a certain point in time, I'm not sure whether it was 2016 or a little earlier than that, the world began to fall apart. And that was when I realized that part of my job was not just to speak or to write, but to cheer people up. And I think Little Miss or Little Mr. Cheerful has to be colored yellow. So I thought wearing a yellow tie cheers people up. And by and large, consciously or subconsciously, it does. However, I also do something else. I must have about 50 yellow ties. But when I'm doing a really difficult speech, I will wear a yellow tie that was given to me by a very close friend. My friends, noticing that I wear yellow ties, tend to make a present of a yellow tie. And when I'm feeling I'm wearing something that a friend gave me in love, it just makes the speech so much easier. I think just to end tonight on that, I tried to give you a glimpse into this man, into his vision. And we're going to spend the next 3 weeks going in further detail to some of his core ideas. But just reflect on this ending story. Despite being, or as well as being, this astonishing public intellectual who was friends and advisor to kings and princes, to presidents and to leaders. Nevertheless, he gave thought to the color tie that he wore because he thought it would help people feel a little bit better. That sensitivity, to me, is even more astonishing than his brilliant output and his inspirational ideas. And I hope together over the next 3 weeks, I think we'll have a break and then we'll have 3 more weeks, we're going to explore some of Rabbi Sachs's ideas. So I'm going to pause there. We have one more minute, but I'm happy to go over a little bit further. But any thoughts or questions so far? Just to say, at the end of these sheets is first of all this book here, a beautiful lecture from him, and also an address that he gave to the JFNA a number of years ago in 2013. Very powerful speech. So if you have this on email, you could just click the links. If not, you may need to find another way of doing that. If you want to see the Why I'm a Jew that we couldn't play, again, the link is at the front on the sheets. So if you've got it in the email, you could just click on it, and the biography as well. So I put all the links there, so you should be able to access that. Yeah.
Where was it in the email?
That video from my laptop, if you wish.
Oh, they could, I think.
If you know, the email we got about the schedule, and it was labeled, I think, it's like the weekly email, but this one, the feature in the title, subject line, is Yom HaAtzmaut. If you went down about 5 sections, it says source sheet here, Sheila, and click on the year.
All right, I didn't pay attention to that. I'm sorry. Okay,
great, fantastic.
The yellow tie story is marvelous, but it's what we always say: clothes matter. And rabbis, I know, you know, what you wear and when becomes very important.
100%. Any other thoughts or questions before we close for this evening? Okay, Well, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Yasher
Thank
Koach.
you. Thank you.
Really appreciate you spending this
Yasher
evening.
This was excellent. This was excellent.
Thank you.
See you
Bye-bye.
soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.